I think you've hit the nail on the head there. Sometimes falls are framed as something that just happens when we
Sure.
get older. And that's absolutely not the case. As I say, most falls are avoidable. They have a cause, and that cause can be addressed and controlled to an extent. We can certainly reduce the number of falls we're experiencing or remove that cause of falls completely. So, absolutely, falls are not something we just have to put up with and deal with.
Yep.
They absolutely be avoided. Certainly not being afraid, I think, to ask for help if we need it,
Yeah.
particularly with mobility. These things change from day to day. We can have good days where we feel quite steady, and then we might be ill, or we might just not feel as well balanced as normal for whatever reason. And recognizing that, recognizing the impact that might have on balance, and seeking help or support where we need it.
Hi, I'm Luca. Welcome to the Living Care Company channel, where we help people navigate through their loved ones' care journeys. And we really like to speak to people connected with care in some sort of way, whether they're care experts or suppliers or therapists or equipment producers, or what you do, Jules, which is really important, working for the Royal Society for the Prevention of Accidents. Tell us what you do and why it's so important.
Yeah, hi Luca.
Oh,
RoSPA's falls engagement lead. So my job is to try and prevent avoidable falls in all their guises. So throughout the life course, in the workplaces, in homes, and out and about, wherever they might happen, I try to prevent them. RoSPA's overall mission is vision for an accident-free world. So obviously, as a major cause of harm in our society, fall prevention is a big part of that.
yeah, yeah. There's some sort of way of looking at falls in older people that can be this sort of thing, where it's almost thought of as an inevitability when someone gets less good on their feet and they start to neurologically be unable to coordinate legs, balance, or whatever. They're just going to fall over. But that's probably not the way to look at it, is it?
That's right. Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head there. Sometimes falls are framed as something that just happens when we
Sure.
get older. And that's absolutely not the case. As I say, most falls are avoidable. They have a cause, and that cause can be addressed and controlled to an extent. We can certainly reduce the number of falls we're experiencing or remove that cause of falls completely. So, absolutely, falls are not something we just have to put up with and deal with.
Yep.
They absolutely be avoided.
Many families are juggling caring for older relatives while managing their own lives, work and families and all the rest of it. In that context, accidents can obviously be a big worry. Tell us about what RoSPA does and what they could do to help those sorts of families.
Yeah, RoSPA have a few arms of influence. We talk to politicians and government, kind of policies and home design and that kind of thing. We talk to professionals that provide education and training. And we also talk to kind of members of the public, and we give advice on the safest way to be around the home, as I say, out and about as well. We have a number of different packages of advice, I suppose you'd call them. Falls has been a kind of primary focus of campaign for a number of years. So we have developed some training courses aimed at both kind of professionals working in housing, but also kind of casual carers or professional carers who might come into contact with people they're worried about when it comes to falls, to try and help them understand what simple steps can be taken to reduce the likelihood of the person that they know encountering a fall.
Yep. Do you categorize falls in terms of severity? I suppose you do, but you do hear about quite a lot of people who were almost totally fine on their feet, but then have that really quite severe fall where a hip is broken or a shoulder's severely damaged, and it almost came out of nowhere that the person hadn't had a fall before, and then they have that really quite consequential fall that hopefully doesn't totally colour the rest of their life, but is at risk of actually making the rest of their life quite impacted by that event. What's your sort of view of that, and how, if something's coming out of the blue like that, what's the best way of kind of thinking about it? I remember my dad, when he was walking around, was very careful. He never had a fall, but he was extremely careful going over curbs and all that sort of stuff. And I don't know how he wasn't careful about many things, but he was careful about where his feet went and not falling over. What's your view on those sorts of falls that seem to come out of nowhere, but then actually can be really quite consequential for people?
It's so difficult, isn't it? When there's no warning sign, that's very difficult. And there's no kind of opportunities to potentially identify things that might be a problem in the future. If it just comes out of the blue, that's really tricky. You mentioned kind of hip fractures.
Yep.
Now we know hip fractures can be a really cruel event where your independence is just taken from you in a snap second. We know from looking at the data, so there's a national hip fracture database, and it shows us that across England, every 15 minutes, 2 people for hip fracture.
Yep.
So this is a widespread issue. But as you were saying, if there are no warning signs, it can be really difficult to prevent from happening. We know that postmenopausal women, for example, who may have weaker bones than other people, are more likely to suffer hip fractures. So maintaining good levels of calcium in the diet and vitamin D as well, that's really important for those groups. But I think in terms of an accident without any kind of warning signs, are amongst the hardest to prevent. Definitely very difficult.
Right. So it's just often a question of general health and wellness and diet and getting outside and getting enough sunlight.
Particularly if we're looking outside the home, those kind of individual factors like a good diet, good hydration, well-managed medications, avoiding things that make us dizzy or drowsy when we're out and about is good advice to start with. And certainly not being afraid, I think, to ask for help if we need it, particularly with mobility. These things change from day to day. We can have good days where we feel quite steady, and then we might be ill, or we might just not feel as well balanced as normal for whatever reason. And recognizing the impact of balance and seeking help or support where we need it.
You mentioned the statistics there actually about falls, and there must be quite a detail, or is there a way of trying to see from the statistics what led to the fall? For example, balance, and that's vestibular ability, isn't it? Are you able to look at the database and go, okay, actually vestibular issues had an impact on, say, a third or half of those falls? Or are you able to drill down into the stats to that extent where you can link or
I'd love to say yes, Luca. It's actually awful that we don't have that level of insight into why these horrific events occur. We have anecdotal, of course, everybody knows somebody who's fallen. We all have an anecdote, but on a national or on a regional level, even that level of kind of cause and effect isn't available. My background is in health and safety, and obviously in the workplace, we do a lot of looking. If there's a near miss or if there's an accident, we try to learn everything we can from. But those kind of data collection and kind of interrogation systems don't exist for the home, and they haven't existed since 2002, 2003 was the last time we had that kind of data. The government used to run something called the Home Accident Surveillance System, and that would provide us quite a detailed level of insight into how people were coming to harm, if it was a specific product in their home or a specific type of behavior that was causing a lot of people problems. And that would allow us to target advice to suit the needs of the population. But those kind of data collection services, unfortunately, don't exist anymore. It's certainly something that RoSPA campaigning has been reinstated as part of our campaign for a national accident prevention strategy. It would really help us to give that targeted advice and understand exactly how people are coming to serious harm.
Could you take, for example, 100 injuries from falls, whether hip fractures or shoulders or whatever, and then attempt to contact those people and backfill that information so that you can get a sample of data which might be interesting and helpful? Or is that not really something you could do?
What we used to have was people sat in A&E and literally filling in a form, understanding how that person had come to be in A&E, if it was an accidental harm. Then we would have that kind of insight as to the story that led to this injury. Of course, that only works when people turn up, actually need treatment at a hospital or GPs, And we know if we look at
Yep.
the accident pyramid where you've got death on the top and major injury, minor injury, and then you've got a kind of cohort that may not turn up for treatment, but obviously have encountered harm. And that can often go unreported. Those anecdotes actually can be more valuable than you might think at first.
Yep. Yep. Falls are a huge concern for families with older relatives. Why are falls such a common problem as we age? And are there some common myths about falls that you would like to dispel?
Yeah, I think it's easy to trivialize falls, slips, trips, and falls because ever since the moment when we learn to walk as toddlers, as children, we have falls. It's an effect of walking upright, isn't it? We occasionally fall. Throughout our life course, we tend to be more robust. We don't suffer so many injuries or serious harm from falls as we do when we get a bit older. As we've touched on, bone strength and bone fragility can be a serious risk when it comes to suffering an injury from a fall. In terms of managing, there's a lot of things we can do with our health and lifestyle to address those risks those intrinsic risks that we tend to carry around with us, and particularly to minimize the harm we might encounter if we do have a slip or a trip that leads to a fall. Now, a lot of those kind of risk factors are fairly nicely outlined in a kind of RoSPA training pack that we call Fall Fighter. So that is a product of a fall prevention campaign that we've done for older adults. And it looks at those kind of personal risk factors to do with our health and our lifestyles, and also looks at kind of fall prevention around the home and the different adaptations we can make to reduce the chance of having a fall.
Thank you. What are some of the simple things that families can do to make their homes safer for an older relative and reduce the risk of falls? And are there particular areas of the house that you'd want to pay more attention to than other areas of the house?
Yeah, so I think you can split things into two categories. So those things that you need to look at, kind of once in a blue moon, like for example, how good is the lighting front step? Do we
Yep.
need a brighter light so we can see if we come back home in the evening? Can we see how we get up the stairs and into the front door? And there's other things that need that kind of continuous monitoring, like stuff on the stairs. We're all guilty. We're thinking, I'll just put that there. Next time I go up, I'll take it with me. And of course, someone might come down in the meantime, or you might forget it's there and put your foot on it. There's those two categories of kind of environmental control. And then you mentioned kind of different areas. Well, really depends on person's home and what aspect of fall prevention they are challenged most by. So if it is not being able to see things clearly, then clearly areas where floors might get wet and we might not be able to see the water on the surface, like the kitchen or
Yes.
the bathroom.
Yep.
So we might look at measures that reduce the risk of puddles forming in the first place, or ways of catching water before it becomes a bit of a slip hazard. I certainly think the bedroom is a kind of an underrepresented area of focus as well. So if we're up in the night, we are unsteady on our feet. All of us are. When we get up in the night, we're not quite with it. It's really important that we have a light that we can put on. I think wandering around in the dark is something we tend to do, particularly if we're worried about waking other people up. So the worst way to wake up is to someone having had a fall. So I think pop the lights on and do everyone a favour, pop the lights on and be able to see clearly where you're going. Yeah, so I think lighting and also footwear, of course, making sure our slippers aren't those slip-on types that are so easy to put your foot into, aren't they? But they're also so easy for the foot to slide out again.
Yeah.
Particularly if we're using the stairs, if those kind of hazards tend to combine. If we're losing a shoe and we're on the stairs, obviously the consequences of that could be really disastrous. Making sure we're not using slip-on footwear, trying to choose something that is more supportive to the foot and actually fits onto the foot as well.
Thank you. I think RoSPA mentions making stairs safer by design. What kind of changes can families make to their stairs to make them less of a hazard?
Absolutely. So our Safer Stairs campaign is something that we're really pushing for, and that will be for new build homes. Of
Yep.
course, if we can design the staircase to be safer by design from the outset, the likelihood of falls is reduced by 60%. So it's a huge reduction in potential harm for generations to come. That said, new build properties are obviously a very small slither of housing stock in this country. So it's really important that we can look at existing staircases and make those safer too. So Those kind of one-stop shops might be looking at the handrail. Is the handrail in good condition? Is it firm and supportive, or does it wobble when we hang on to it?
Yep.
Ideally, we want double handrails, so we can use both of our hands to support us. And it means if we're carrying stuff with left or our right hand on the stairs, we've got a handrail on each side. So if we do trip, we can stop ourselves from falling in that circumstance. If we struggle with our eyesight, it might be worth considering kind of high contrast edges to the stairs. Definitely avoid patterned carpet on stairs, as that can make it harder to navigate the stairs. We've mentioned lighting already, so obviously that's not stair design per se, but that's very important when it comes to safe use. Those kind of continuous activities might be to keep a close eye on the condition of the floor covering. So that might be carpet, ensuring that it doesn't become very threadbare. There are no little
Yep.
threads sticking up that are going to catch our feet, or the carpet isn't going to roll off the step as we go down the stair, because we don't want to slip.
Yep.
So there are lots of little bits to think about, but certainly the design of a safer staircase and reducing chance of a fall by 60% is something RoSPA's really pushing for at the moment.
So obviously accidents don't just happen at home. Jules, what can families do to help prevent falls when their loved ones are out and about in the community? And indeed, how many accidents happen at home and what proportion of accidents happen outside of the home?
Yeah, so a very large proportion of falls are going to, and potentially that's due to the amount of time we spend at our home, particularly in later years of life. As we've discussed, a lot of the intrinsic factors are going to keep us safe at home and outside as well. So I think an over-reliance on designing a safe environment could make us less likely to want to venture into environments that we see as more risky. So pavements spring to mind. We've all tripped over a paving slab, haven't we? If we neglect to maintain our kind of intrinsic risk control, so that is our diet, nutrition, strength and balance is a big one. So if we want to continue with our walks around and not be too worried by these paving slabs, fall prevention and fall management exercise is really important. And there's actually University of Glasgow, University of Nottingham have come together and they've actually produced this science-backed exercise program called FAME. And that has been proven to reduce the risk of falls in older adults. So it's really worth looking at if you're interested in maintaining strength and balance. That FAME program is definitely the one to go for. And as I say, I think by maintaining our strength and balance, we're less likely to have a fall wherever we go. Of course, our environmental risk and hazards around us have an impact on us, of course, but that should really help us to feel more robust and more able to maintain our independence, be about the places we'd like to do. The last thing we want is for people to feel frightened of falling, that they sit still and they stay still and they don't want to go out, because actually not only is fear of falling a risk factor in itself, it makes us likely to fall. If we spend a lot of time sitting down and quite a sedentary lifestyle, we decondition, we lose our muscle strength. Actually, when we do come to get up and walk around, we're less able to recover if we have a trip or a slip, and we're more likely to fall. And then, as a result, less likely to recover well. So it's this ongoing cycle of harm. So really, strength and balance is perhaps the one thing to really go for.
Great, thank you. What resources does RoSPA offer to families who are concerned about falls of loved ones, and where can someone go for reliable information and advice on that?
Yeah, so RoSPA, as I say, we've got Fall Fighter, which is an excellent free resource that anybody can download from our website. We've put it on our Fall Prevention Hub, which is full of information about how to reduce the likelihood of a fall. We've also got a little video for avoiding falls out and about as well. So that's when we, as I say, when we leave the house, things that we might think about before we make a journey, during journeys, and when we come back home as well. So how to keep safe wherever we're going and avoid falls. I think it's worth using a check sheet. We can get a check sheet from RoSPA's website as well, and that will walk you through the main causes of falls in the home. So what to do about them as well. So not just to highlight the risk, but actually to address it and try to control it better. Obviously, some risk factors are seasonal. So we might only see puddles and moss or whatever during the winter. We might only see the ice in the winter. We might only get glare in the summer. So there's lots of things to think about. So it's important that this approach to controlling the fall risk is quite continuous, like a rolling thing, not just a once in a blue moon type activity. And worth
Yeah,
kind of
constant
staying
sort of
alive to the
vigilant.
changing risk as well.
No, absolutely. Aside to falls, what are some of the other common safety issues that families should be aware of regarding their loved ones? Things like kitchen safety, medication safety, or perhaps fire safety. What are some of the most important ones?
So RoSPA have just done a big analysis of kind of hospital data, A&E kind of mission data for our national accident prevention strategy. We've seen a doubling in the incidences of accidental poisonings for over 65. So the rate has shot up in the last decade. So I
Is that
definitely,
from medication or from food, which is poisonous, or both? Or?
it's hard to say. As I say, we don't have that level of kind of insight. And unfortunately, the A&E data doesn't always give us the full story. So there's certainly more work to be done there. But there's definitely an argument for making sure that medications are well stored, using blister packs if we feel that a loved one might forget if they've taken their medication, definitely having a system that your loved one can interpret and understand. And if they're struggling with that, perhaps looking at different ways the medication might be supervised, because certainly taking medication when we've already taken it and things like that is likely to lead to accidental poisoning being reported on the stats that we see. So other areas for safety of older adults, I think if we look at kind of methods for heating the home, potentially we've seen the cost of living and the cost of heating our homes is really going up. So I suppose finding safe ways, alternative ways potentially, that we might keep ourselves warm without kind of reverting to what might be dangerous practice or other kind of fire risk. So perhaps having that conversation, or certainly if you see dangerous behaviors starting to creep in, to question those and not be afraid. Don't be afraid to have difficult conversations. Safety is often a difficult conversation, but certainly don't regret not having that conversation for the sake of it.
No, absolutely.
Definitely do call out things that are inherently dangerous. Obviously, the danger is going to be more keen to people who are less mobile. So really worth thinking about escape routes in the case of a fire. Let's not neglect those for the sake of becoming very snug. Getting all wrapped up in blankets is great, but we still need to be able to react to danger if we see.
No, absolutely. Are there any specific tips that you could give regarding older adults who live alone?
That's a good one. Yeah. And it's a question I get quite a lot. If we're living alone, I think it's even more important to think about how we might minimize the consequences of anything that does go wrong. So, of course, RoSPA's vision for an accident-free world, that's great. And we always go towards prevention instead of cure. But there's a reason there's a tire wall on the F1 course, because sometimes crashes, and it's important that we think about what we do in those circumstances. So having a personal alarm or a mobile phone or whatever we're most comfortable with on hand if we do have a problem, maybe arranging a daily check-in with someone. It needn't be a phone call or a big video call. It might just be a message to say, yeah, all good, or whatever. But finding a system where you can give each other peace of mind. I think so often it's seen as a one-way street, or you're just checking up on me, but you're checking up to give yourself peace of mind and to say that everything's okay. It's a two-way street, isn't it? And also to recognize limitations when they appear. I think we touched on kind of some days being better than others and reacting to that. Some days I could pop my bins out, and other days I'm not quite feeling it. So maybe I could ask a neighbor if I've got a friend or a relative I might be able to call on, but not being afraid to seek help from the local authority if we need it. Some councils are going to offer a service where they can come and bring your bin to the curb for you. Do reach out to local authorities and authorities as well.
Absolutely. How can families start a conversation with an older relative about safety without making them feel patronized or worried? Typically, maybe an older person who really feels very proud of their independence and doesn't want to feel that they're losing it. What sort of conversations can people have to help their loved ones in those
Yeah.
situations?
Yeah, and this is a tricky one because it's not the same as child safety, where we can just put things up high and out of reach. That it's not the same. Losing independence is horrible. Be horrible for everybody. So, of course, there's that huge emotional burden behind it. But as we just said, I think it's a two-way street. It's about your loved one feeling safe, you having peace of mind, working together to keep each other going, promoting independence and safety, because it is a balance. We must react to our capabilities, and the changes that occur in our bodies and our minds is a very complicated thing to do, but we must avoid kind of scare tactics. Scare tactics are bound to alienate people. And as we said earlier, fear is itself a full risk. So we really don't want to be frightening people into making changes. It's important, I think, to get an agreement. It's not something that we're going to enforce. That's quite a tricky road to go down. If we start enforcing changes on people, then inevitably, again, we're going to alienate them and safety becomes the enemy then. And that's the
Yep.
opposite of what we want. So really, I think starting the conversation, I say with a check sheet, with something objective that's not very personal or that's not going to put the defense up. What we want is to have an open conversation about things that are challenging, days that are challenging or times that are challenging, and look at what can help. I think as a generation that potentially have grown to see so much go on, making sure that people are aware of all the different support that's available to them, be people, services, but also adaptations and devices that might make tasks easier or reduce the manual handling involved or reduce the risk involved and that kind of thing are well worth exploring together, because there's nothing like learning about safety together, right?
100%. Where can families go to find more information about RoSPA's resources and programs? Obviously, you've got a website and maybe a helpline and have local contacts, but give us a few of those details if you would.
Yeah, that's right. So our website is www.rospa.com. And on there, you'll see lots of different options. Falls Prevention Hub is under the policy tab. So you'll track along the top of the page to the right and you'll see policy and you'll be able to pop down to the fall prevention hub there. And that's where all of our fall prevention materials are housed, including Fall Fighter. There's also a toolkit for housing professionals. And some people might find that quite interesting to see what kind of housing and social housing providers might do to support older people living in their properties. There are lots of other websites to check out as well. I think I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Age UK and their guidance. Obviously, we work almost in tandem with the support we try to give to older people in the population.
Great. What's the one most important piece of advice that you could give to a family who's looking to look out for a loved one who's older and losing a bit of their sort of physical abilities?
Sure. It's very difficult to pin one thing that I think because everybody's so different, everybody's house is so different. What people prioritize is also so different. I think in light of that, the one piece of advice I give is to look, listen, react to the risks that you feel, that you see. Think about near misses. I think if we're in a workplace, we're well geared towards that was nearly an accident. So how can we learn from that? And I think that's what going back to the question about accident that just comes out of the blue. If we're really sensitive to those warning flags and those dust slip or nearly trip, and we react to those, we can do our utmost to prevent those serious harm, those serious accidents that come down the line.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for your time, Jules, today. Learned a lot there, and brilliant work that you do in helping falls prevention and other accidents. And thanks so much.
Oh, thank you, Luca. That's great.
And to our listeners, subscribe to our channel to listen to all things about care. And thanks for listening. Take care.